You know what's interesting about South Africa's history? Some of the most powerful kingdoms didn't start as big empires. They started as small groups of families trying to survive. And one of those is the Bapedi people. They built their kingdoms in the mountains and valleys of the north. And for a long time, they were one of the strongest powers in the interior. So who exactly are the Pedi people? When people say Bapedi, they're talking about a Sotho-Tswana group in South Africa. They're part of a wider Sotho-speaking world, along with Basotho and Botswana. They speak Sepedi, which sits inside the bigger Sotho language family. Today you'll mostly find them in Limpopo, Gauteng, North Mpumalanga, and parts of the northwest too. They're very much up in the north interior, so they're not coastal people or southern people. And where do they come from? If you go way back, the Bapedi didn't just appear as one unified tribe. They actually trace their early formation to a Khatla offshoot, which is a link of the Tswana-speaking groups. Around the 1600s, they settled south of Steelpoort River. From there, something interesting happened. Different communities started grouping together over time. They organized themselves into family-based units called Dihoro. Think of a Horo like a big extended family compound. Homes around a central space, cattle in the middle, meetings held there, even ancestral rituals happening in the same space. That structure becomes the foundation of how their society worked. By the late 1700s, those groups started coming together under the Maroteng dynasty. That's when the Bapedi started looking less like scattered communities and more like a kingdom. And under King Tulare, things really expanded. At its peak, the kingdom stretches across a huge area from near present-day Rustenburg down towards the Vaal River region. But then things started to get messy during the Mfecana period, when the whole region was basically going through wars, raids, and displacement. The Bapedi kingdom actually got a bit weaker, but it didn't disappear. And then later, under the supreme leadership of Sekwati I, things started to rebuild and everything started to reshape once again, and leadership was restored. Then comes the most famous ruler, Sekunene I. He takes power in 1861, and one of the first things he does is to fortify his kingdom in the Liolo Mountains. So imagine this. Instead of building a flat capital, he builds a defensive mountain stronghold. Now here's where it gets strategic. During this time, young Pedi men are working in mines and farms under colonial systems, but Sekunene uses this system very cleverly. Their wages are used to buy things like guns, to buy cattle, therefore strengthening the kingdom. So even under pressure, the kingdom is finding ways to stay powerful. By the 1870s, things really escalated. The Bapedi end up in conflict with the Boer settlers, and later the British Empire and Swazi forces allied in some of the campaigns. In 1876, the first major war breaks out, and surprisingly enough, the Bapedi actually managed to resist successfully at first. But the pressure doesn't stop. By 1879, the second war happened, a much bigger one involving the British troops and Swazi allies. This time, the resistance is eventually broken. Even though the Bapedi fought hard, the British forces were too strong in the end. After the wars, Sekunene is captured and taken to Pretoria. He is released in 1881, but the kingdom is already weakened. In 1882, something tragic happens. Sekunene is assassinated by his half-brother, Mampuru II. And just like that, the central power of the Bapedi kingdom collapses. Colonial authorities then restructured the land into smaller controlled areas. This was their daily life. Outside of the wars and politics, everyday life was very structured. Most people lived off land, growing sorghum, pumpkins, legumes, and society was very divided in roles. Women handled farming, cooking, pottery, weaving, baskets and mats. The men were doing things like cattle herding, hunting, metalwork, woodwork, livestock management. And what did they believe? Well, spiritually, the Bapedi followed ancestral worship. They believed ancestors were still involved in daily life. So people would do things like make offerings, animal sacrifices, pour beer as rituals, and there were also diviners, people called Nhaka. These were people believed to be called through illness or spiritual possession. And then there were initiation schools. Both boys and girls went through the same. And these were not just ceremonies, they were life transitions. They formed groups called Mepato, and those groups stuck together for life. Language-wise, the Bapedi speak Sepedi, but here's where people often argue online. It's part of a bigger language grouping called Northern Sotho, Sesotho sa Leboa, which includes many dialects. So Sepedi is the Pedi language, but also part of a wider language family. That's why you'll hear different naming depending on who you'll ask. Over time, colonial rule and apartheid changed a lot. Many Bapedi were moved into designated homelands like Leboa. But even with all of that, their identity didn't disappear. It stayed alive through language, culture, traditions, and family structures.